Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be doing an overview and discussion on our progression strategies for Eden's Promise Litany on the Savage difficulty. Almost forgot the name of it right there. Now I've already done one of these for Umbra, very long-winded videos, not really meant to be a guide so much on the fight, but more so breaking down how we understand mechanics during Prog and how we ended up with the strategies we did and improvements that could still be made. They also actually helped me. I actually write the script for my actual guides after doing this video, because sometimes I can catch mistakes that I actually made or things that I thought during Prog that I may have noticed. During my Umbra Savage video, for example, I said the tanks needed to be far or near for specific mechanics, because during Prog, we thought that's what it was. Turned out to just target tanks and healers, and we realized that at some point, but never really adjusted for it. It's just that our strategies in place were already kind of working in that regard. So with this, it actually helps me. While this video is rendering, I will write the script for it and catch some of the mistakes, see things that I think the Party Finder probably shouldn't adopt, but I'm going to include in the guide because it was the way that we actually did it, and make sure that I state that these are weak one strategies that can be improved going into the future. So with that, if you're into long-winded discussions about raid mechanics, how we understood them, how we got to the points that we did, then this is the video for you, and we'll have a formal guide probably in the next couple of days. So with that, let's get to talking about E10 Savage. Now, this is a fight that has quite a few interesting strats. One of probably the most discussed about strategies comes so much further into the fight. There's a good chance that in a few weeks, people are almost going to be expecting to skip it. This is a very, very light DPS check on the fight overall, and if a few people get weapons with even just the tombstone weapons, or they just gradually upgrade their gear, there's a higher and higher possibility that on a clean run you're going to be skipping that last mechanic even in the Party Finder. So we're going to get to that mechanic. We don't do it cleanly in our video, but I can at least discuss how we actually approached it. Now, the big thing is, before we start the fight, we actually had to set up a ton of different positions, and our positions for this were pretty messy. Even if they did work overall, we kind of just did them on a mechanic-to-mechanic basis. One of the big things is we needed to create two semi-light parties. We needed to have one healer and two DPS, each able to share some damage for a mechanic later. This is something that happens a lot in this raid tier, so getting used to the idea of having a tank off on their own and having one healer and two DPS together is something you might as well get used to in the previous fight, this fight, and you're going to need it in the next fight as well for the strategy we use for that. We also had to set spread positions for an early mechanic, and we set different spread positions for a later thing. I think that's going to be that mechanic way later on that I think people are going to be skipping in a few weeks. That we'll cover the positions for that when we get to it, because honestly it's its own discussion with the way that we tackled this during Prog overall. Fortunately for the start of the fight, it's actually really straightforward. A lot of the knowledge that you obtained in normal mode just needs to be applied to the Savage difficulty. All of the attack names that had like left and right or forward or backward in their descriptions in normal mode no longer have that, and you just have to watch the animation of the boss. But fortunately, there's a lot of really quick tips that you can use both in normal and Savage to actually avoid all that stuff. Deep Shadow Nova, just room-wide AoE, nothing too fancy to say about that. But here's the first attack, Implosion. Now, Implosion is either a frontal AoE or a rear AoE. If the boss raises their head, it's frontal. If they raise their tail, it's backward. Now, the big thing I see confuse a lot of people is the shadow and the direction that it represents when doing any of these mechanics. People like to say the shadow acts as the back of the boss, and that is 100% accurate. I don't even like to confuse people with describing that the shadow is the new back of the boss, because then people think, okay, well then I need to reorient and then figure it out. Here's all you need to know for the shadows for Implosion. This is either forward or back. If it's a forward implosion, stand on the same side as the shadow. If it is a backwards implosion, stand opposite of the shadow. That is all you need to know for Implosion. Don't worry about the orientation of the boss versus the shadow. It doesn't matter. That's all you need to know with that. Soon as we figured that out, everyone started doing it flawlessly. It just didn't take a whole lot of brain power. And for one of the other phases later, where it's a left or a right mechanic, we'll describe that then, but another really quick and easy tip for that one as well. So you can see here, it does the implosion, it's forward, so we stand on the shadow. I mean, there's just nothing to say about that other than what I've already described. Right after that, and this was something that actually was catching people for a while, when the boss stands up, he follows up with a giant point-blank AoE. So you really want to know when that timing is going to happen. For this, you know it's right after the implosion, whether it be forward or backward. So melees need to make sure they get up, because it does snapshot quite early, so it'll take a little bit for melees to really master how that's going to go. Now, Giga Slash is the other shadow mechanic I was referring to, and the rule here, it's a little bit more difficult to understand, and there's a few quick tips I can give for understanding left and right Giga Slash. If the boss is raising their right arm, you need to be on the left side of every shadow. If the boss is raising their left arm, you need to be on the right side of every shadow. You're just doing the opposite of whatever it is. What confuses people with this one more than the other one is when the boss is looking at their own shadow and they kind of have to orient, oh, he's going right, which means I need to turn around and flip it. If he's, in this case, he's looking right at his shadow. This is just one little additional tip. If he's looking at his shadow, you go to the side his arm is raised on. That's a 1 in 4 chance of that happening, but it's always a really easy way to identify it because he just basically turns around and hits the other side. And I can't really think of any better way because all the mechanics that use that throughout the fight, whether it's doing it 2 times back-to-back, 3 times back-to-back, 4 times back-to-back, it doesn't matter. The rule just applies 2, 3, or 4 times. And I think that's going to make that week after week as people understand it more and more. That part isn't going to confuse people anymore. So anytime we see that throughout the rest of this video, I'll just tell you you're doing it multiple times back-to-back. Because there's nothing else I can add from from a Prog perspective as to how we perceived it, as to how we ended up with the strat. That's it. It's just a few basic rules to follow. Now, Umbra Smash, this is probably the most deadly tank buster in the entire raid tier. It's 4 back-to-back swipes followed up by either a party split damage or another tank buster. I believe we actually were just, yes, we actually invuln the first one. I think we invuln the second one, and then we super cool down the third one because these just hit super hard. After the 4th swing, we tank swap, and then we just do whichever mechanic it is while the tank who just took all the hits stays out of the way. So if it is Darkness Unleashed, it is a split damage AoE. So the tank that just took aggro from the tank that took the Umbra Smash, they'll just run to the group, and you'll see right here, it does a giant Dark Knight Unleash attack right there. Bam. Hits pretty hard, so make sure to put shields up for that. If it's Shadow Edge, it's another tank buster. So the tank who just took the aggro is definitely going to need to use a cooldown on that because it hits really, really hard. I would probably pop multiple cooldowns on the Shadow Edge, and also, of course, make sure you face it away from everyone. It's on your tank. As long as they're paying attention, there's very little that can go wrong here, as well as they're both paying attention. So going in a little bit further, we have Shadow Cleave. Now, this is actually going to do a conal AoE in the direction of every player, and it's going to give them a clone at the same time. So you'll see right there, that's why we have everybody spread out. Although, yeah, it does do a good amount of damage, and it does give magic vuln to everyone. So you do need to make sure that everybody is in a spread position for that. So that's the position we assigned for this. But like I said, later in the fight, we actually assigned a different spread position for an entirely different mechanic. And again, we'll talk about that later. So these shadows that they leave behind are quite interesting. They basically spawn behind you wherever you're standing when the Shadow Cleave hits you. And if you get too close to them, they'll actually start doing a cleave, which will kill anyone that it hits if it actually gets to them. So we actually make an effort to drop these a little bit further away from the boss. The melees just kind of do a GCD, take a step back, make sure it spawns a little bit far away, and then they go back to the boss. They try and do that all between a GCD so they don't actually lose any damage. And ranged and casters shouldn't have much an issue. You can pre-position for this well in advance after the Darkness Unleashed or Shadow Edge, and so they have plenty of time to get it done. What's actually going to matter more is the follow-up mechanic that comes right after it, and this is going to be on everyone to kind of pay attention to their own shadow. You're going to have to look at your own shadow and understand what you need to do here, and don't worry about anyone else. So when the boss starts casting Dual Spell, it's going to do a split damage AoE 3 times on the same target. It's going to be one of 2 targets whose clones have no numbers over their head. So I'm not sure if that's always on the same roll. I didn't see any consistency with it when we were actually doing this. I sometimes didn't have any numbers over mine's head, but that seemed like a very rare occurrence. The other 6 shadows are either going to have a 1, a 2, or a 3 over their head. Now, what that's letting you know is that when he actually casts the split damage AoE, each of those shadows is also going to take a hit depending on their number. So the first split damage AoE, all of the shadows with a 1 over their head are going to get hit, and it's going to deal damage to the player. So it's going to take about half of their health and give them magic vuln, and that means they can't join in the stack. So basically, if your shadow has a 1 over its head, we just told everyone to get out. If we just told those 2 people with 1 over their head to get out. So look at your shadow, see the number. After the first AoE goes off, the 1s need to get into the stack damage. The 2s, the ones with 2s over their heads, need to get out. Then after the second split damage AoE comes out, the 2s go back in, and the 3s go out. Wow, I'm really stuttering over this. And then by that point, all of the dual spells have resolved. So you need 6 people in each of these dual spells to do it nice and cleanly. 1's out, 2's out, 3's out. And then after you are out for one, you make sure you go in. So there's always 6 people. It's so clean to execute as long as people are paying attention. So you can see on the left-hand side, FK over by 4 is out. They're a 1. So they're making sure they're out of this group. We have another person, the person in the northeast, right there, who is also out. You can see the 1 over their shadow's head. Mine, over in the top left corner here, has a 2 over its head. So what's going to happen? Well, dual spell's going to finish casting. First split damage AoE comes out. I'm going to move out because I have a 2 over my head. You can see that's what the AoE looks like that hits the 1, 2s, and the 3s in their respective order. And the person right next to me was also a 2. So they move out, and you get a kind of an idea of a distance that you can be from your shadow right there and still be safe. You know, this looks really scary. That's here, let me go back one more frame. That's closer than I would probably ever get to my shadow. Another step close to his shadow, he'd probably die. But it gives you an idea of how far you can be from your shadow before they start trying to hit you with that cleave. Now, after the second one goes out, we go back in for the 3rd split damage, and the 3s come out. And that's all you have to do for dual spell. Now, the big thing here is Shadow Keeper. This attack will basically... it will pull the shadow behind you again, but it will then automatically follow up with a cleave. So you have to make sure you face these away from other players, and ideally facing away from the boss, and then get clear of them as quickly as possible. So you'll see me, I stand a little bit far out. You know, it's not too far. Mine's in melee range, but it's facing towards the outside. So when I run into the boss's hitbox here, they all aim away. And that's all we did. It doesn't matter how close you are to the boss. As long as you just face them out and everybody runs under the boss's hitbox, then as long as everyone does it right, you're fine. There should be no sort of chance for any sort of lethal damage to come out during that. And then they go away, and that mechanic is completely done. Another Umbra Smash comes out, and this one we also used tank invulns on. This thing just hits so freaking hard, man. Like, if you're gonna take an Umbra Smash, and we have to at one point, without a tank invuln, you want as many possible cooldowns as you can. And keep in mind, this tank may have had the possibility to take a Shadow Edge earlier. So they might have 1 less cooldown or even 2 less cooldowns than they did before. I would say, you know, save 30% for Umbra Smash if you know that you're going to be taking one. You can use 20% and maybe like a 6-second ability, but you got to have multiple cooldowns. And healers, you cannot be messing around with this either. I want to see Resi X Cogs. I want to see Benedictions saved for this. I want to see Essential Dignities, well, whatever. Just don't mess around with them because they hit so hard if you're not invulning them. Then there's another tank swap, and we got lucky. We got 2 Darkness Unleashed in a row, so our tanks didn't have to use any additional cooldowns. We're in a soil right now, and there's nothing fancy to say about that. Have shields, you know, have people healed up, and it's just not going to do a whole lot. Now, Shadow Servant is a little bit different. So this is also going to summon shadows, but they're going to summon shadows of the boss. And this is you basically aiming left and right Giga Slash. Your shadow is going to do whatever the boss is doing, and then when it finishes casting, it's going to swing in whatever direction he's swinging. This one's actually pretty simple. So you can see the shadow is to the right. Your shadows don't move. There's always going to be 1 shadow going north, 1 south, 1 east, and 1 west. 1 towards each cardinal position. And from that point on, it's pretty simple. There's actually a graph out there that will just let you at a glance know which one you have, where to stand, depending on which way he's actually raising his sword. But essentially all I do, and you kind of see me do it here, I orient myself behind him, or I orient myself with the boss and the shadow with me sandwiched in between them. And then I just look at which hand he's raising. If he's raising his right hand, I go right. If he's raising his left hand, I go left. And you don't even have to go that far with these. We keep these entirely in melee range the whole time. So you can see we basically use these 4 inner markers, and everybody does just that. You'll see I'm on 3, and my shadow's aiming out to the right. Everyone's doing that. And there's plenty of space here. It'll bind you for a second right before Giga Slash actually finishes casting. And they just have to get under the boss's hitbox. And bam, it looks so clean, even though you can barely see it with all the shadows on the screen. So one more time. This, again, there's hardly anything to discuss from our prog here. Because this, I mean, it's just straightforward. So I'm between my shadow and the boss. So I can see the boss is raising his right arm. So I go right. Now, obviously, this is a little bit weirder if you're staring directly at the boss, but you still just need to understand your rights and your lefts. And it's very, very quick to see if you've screwed it up. So if you're not confident about this, I'd say sprint. Save movement tools for this, because you can fix this pretty easily. And even if you screw up a little bit, as long as people are at least a little bit aware of one that's been screwed up, there's plenty of room under the boss. The boss actually doesn't do their own attack here. Shadowkeeper will only attack from the shadows. So you can stand on the right side of the boss in this case. You just can't stand to the right of any of the shadows. So that's what you'll see here. You'll see this nice big open square here. The boss's right side is wide open. Bam. Now that can be either tanks and healers first or all 4 DPS first. In that case, all 4 DPS went first. So now the tanks and the healers are going to get the second round. If somebody's dead, it'll just give somebody 2 shadows. That's not that big of a deal. But the rules of it are exactly the same. At the end of the day, the execution is going to be the same regardless of which role you are. It's just a matter of whether or not you go first or second. And here you can see all of them. He's raising his right arm again, and they're all just aiming them towards the outside, and bam, look at that nice crisp square. It's a huge safe spot when you do it correctly. So there's not much more to say about that. This fight, fortunately, other than one of the very final mechanics, does not have a whole lot to discuss. The next thing here is when he transforms back after he does that Shadow Serpent. He's actually going to get back on all 4s. This will always be accompanied by a knockback, just like in normal mode. There's just no markers. So I knockback resist every single one of these throughout the fight. This one's not that important to knockback resist, but you can knockback resist all of them, so you might as well. That's the way I look at it. So that'll be good for melee. Oh, I actually didn't this one pull. Our kill was the one pull. I didn't do it to every single one of them. Well, way to make me look like an idiot, but at the very least, it goes to show you it doesn't matter whether or not you do it with that one. Now, this next mechanic gets a lot of people. Umbral Orbs. Basically, there's going to be 2 purple orbs and 2 purple singular orbs and 2 groups of 3 orbs. Now, basically, the purple orbs hit for like tank buster level damage, so tanks need to prioritize getting those. The groups of 3 will actually deal split damage that is intended to be split between 3 people. Not only that, if you don't take the triple orbs with exactly 3 people, or at the very least, I should say at least 3 people, I believe. I don't know if it's exactly 3, but it's at least 3. Then they'll actually give you damage down also. So you might live, but you're also going to have like a 50% damage down for like 30 seconds. So it's really not worth doing. So what we had to do with this was probably the thing we had to discuss the most, because there's a multitude of patterns with these orbs that can come out. And so making sure that our tanks were on the same page of which ones they were getting, and making sure that our groups of 3 knew which ones they were getting, took a lot of discussion. I think a lot of people are going to approach this slightly differently, but we basically just had to set a priority. That's the only way you can do it. So it's about finding a priority that works for your team. For example, I know that one of our tanks was, if it's north or west, it's mine. The other tank went, if it's east or south, it's mine. Now that works to some degree, but sometimes there's like an orb north and an orb east, or an orb north and an orb west. So there had to be some flexibility, but each tank needed to identify that the other tank had priority on one and get the other. The same was basically said about the groups of 3 here, which is a lot stricter because you need all 3 people to be on the same page or it's leading towards a problem. So we had it, we kind of had it the same way. We had it so that basically the tank that was north or west, their orb was basically like true north. And then one group of 3 would get the left orb, looking at that orb, and the other one would get the right. This, we had to reconcile this many times over, because some people were doing it left or right relative of the boss. Some people are doing it left and right relative of the orb. Some people were, it constantly got confused. And this is why this is one of the big things I think people are going to need to understand how the priority works. Make sure you're always 100% clear how you're determining the priority for these orbs. Now, fortunately, we also had it so that if a player could be trusted to go to the correct spot, we marked them. And that's exactly what happened here. So you see that I'm basically the mark for my group of 3. So we were on that right side in that case. Actually, in our case specifically, the circle marker is our true north. The tank with the circle marker was our true north. So that was how we landed with this. So we were on the left-hand side relative to them. So like I said, we did this all sorts of weird, but he was on Is he on the A mark? No, we ended up on the A mark. Yeah, see, it's just, it's all over the place. So that's going to be one that when I write the guide, I'm a little apprehensive about how to tell people how to do it. So I'm glad that I'm talking through it now because it's giving me an idea of a better way of wording it versus right now when I'm kind of just spewing through what's actually happening in the fight. Now, that exact priority system really gets put to the test a second later. This mechanic's really easy, but it's also really easy to screw it up and lose the whole run to it. So this is what I like to call cups. You ever play the cup game where they hide something under a cup and you got to follow it? Well, that's what basically happens here. It happens in normal mode too, but in Savage, there's actually 4 doggos. So the boss is going to tether to one of these 4 shadow clones that is dashing around the room. And you have to follow the one that it tethered to first. And that's where the next AoE is going to happen. It's going to be a forward implosion, thankfully. It's very consistent with that. And so the good news is you really don't have to follow it the whole time. It always jumps 5 times. So it'll basically do a full loop around to where it started. And then either jump clockwise or counterclockwise from there. So you just have to look for that last motion. So this one is on 4. This one's on C, it looks like. So we know for a fact this mechanic is either happening at D or B, west or east, because of, you know, where it's actually starting. So you'll see he'll jump. You'll see him any second now. He takes a long time there. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's right back to where he started. This last jump is the only jump that matters. And he went back the way that he came. So that means we know we have to go do the very next mechanic on that side of the room. And because he's going to do a forward implosion, we basically have this small line along the outside of the room, along his flanks, in order with which to actually do this next mechanic. And it's Umbral Orbs, again. And these Umbral Orbs are a little more annoying. So for one, they're all over the place. There's, you know, like one purple orb that's far away, one purple orb that's near, a group of 3 that's near, and a group of 3 that's far away. Now, one thing I didn't mention about Umbral Orbs before is that they attack whoever's closest. So if you are closer to the closer to the purple orb than the tank, you will take it in place of them, and it deals that full damage to anyone that it hits. So for this, I mean, we just had to set up a priority again. I mean, it was just a matter of, you know, if we're looking in the direction we're running, then one tank gets the left orb, one tank gets the right orb, the one group of 3 gets the left orb, the other group of 3 gets the right orb. And again, that's just not really adequate, I feel, for the party finder. Just to say, oh, you know, look towards where you're running and then go left or right. I mean, it sounds really simple because I've done it a bunch, but there's going to be, well, do you mean looking at the boss? Do you mean looking at the wall? And that's just the biggest problem with this fight, is people just thinking of their orientation differently. So assigning things more like north to south or east to west is likely to be the better way of judging this. But basically, you know, running towards the wall, I took the leftmost, you know, group of 3. Now, fortunately for us, we actually have a really easy orb right there. So that's about the amount of safe space that you have to work with right there. Now, the big thing here is that because the orbs are all different distances away, you need to make sure you're closer to one set of orbs, the orb that you actually want to grab relative to your role in all this, while not being closer to one that doesn't belong to you. For example, if a tank has a purple orb and they're standing like way in the front of this AoE, but there's also red orbs that are really close to them, the other group, if they're too far away, it's going to get people killed. Now, we have a group of red ones right next to us, so we kind of have the easy side on that batch. The other side, I might kind of want to find footage of what it looks like when it's harder, is going to be a little bit harder to do, because these are all, you can see, we know for a fact that the other set of red orbs is actually behind us while we're running away. So it would be, where are we at? We're at C. It would basically be what's behind me? Where 1 is, like way in the corner. So that group of 3 needs to be kind of like up further, while their tank needs to be back a little bit further because their purple orb is closer. Meanwhile, the tank next to them, the tank grabbing the left orb, this is something that needs a diagram, because these things are distance based. You can't just go to the spot that like is directly in front of it. You kind of need to consider how close you are to the orbs. There is no way the tank is getting this orb from us, but if we went all the way to the corner over here, like if we went all the way to the corner here, this would probably go to the tank instead of us. So we need to make sure we are right in front of this while he makes sure he's closer to his orb all the way at the very front. Generally speaking, if your orb is on your half of the room, practically speaking, then you can just stand forward and you should be fine. If yours is way in the far back, you need to be forward, but the person next to you needs to be a little bit further back. It's really tough to describe, but it's just a matter of micro movements of people being in the right spot, but maybe being slightly too far back or slightly too far forward. And it takes a little bit of finessing before people are really all used to it. And remember, if you screw it up, people are either going to die or get damage downs. And you really don't want that, because you want to be able to skip that last mechanic that I keep warning you about. Another Deep Shadow Nova here. I believe it's just another... Is this like a rotating shadow here, I think? Fade to Shadow. Oh, this first Fade to Shadow means almost nothing. So Fade to Shadow, it's going to be 4 AoEs, and you can see all of their origin points in each of the corners. The ones with straight lines will explode first in a giant point-blank AoE, and the ones with squiggles will explode second. So for this mechanic, you want to go to the squiggly lines first. But the big thing is that the boss itself is going to cast an implosion here. So you're going to see in a second that it is implosion. It also comes from a shadow. So this is where knowing whether you need to be with the shadow or opposite of the shadow is important. We see that the tail is risen, so we know to go to the opposite side of the shadow. So we need to go to the squiggly line that's on the opposite side of the room as the shadow. So you don't want to commit too hard to one side. You really want to make sure that you wait to see the shadow and which mechanic is appearing. So we're on the safe side here. We're over by the tail. We're all good. You can see that's about the size of the point blank AoEs right there. So we can hover kind of close to the middle with the way that our markers are. And then these squiggly line ones will explode second. There's nothing else happening here. You just need to remember to move out of those giant point blank AoEs. You can see they basically meet in the very center of the room. They don't even overlap. So as long as you're, perpendicular to them, you should be fine. Another Deep Shadow Nova. Anyone who took a hit here, if it's not a tank, as you can see, one of our tanks took a hit, probably dead. It's if they're a healer or DPS and they survive the first hit, that Deep Shadow Nova, if they're not Bennied or something, is going to cause problems. This is just 4 back-to-back front or back implosions. We see the tails raised, we get opposite of the shadow. They'll appear in order, so we know be opposite of the first shadow. Oh, the second shadow's there. Go through to the other side. Oh, would you look at that? We know where the third shadow is. Go opposite of that. Oh, look, we know where the fourth shadow is. Go opposite of that. And that's all it is. I don't have any additional advice. You just have to take this the way I determined to do it and just pay attention. And I wish I had more to say. I wish there was something more to it. But there isn't. And it looks really cool to do at the very least. After you do that, I'm pretty sure the boss stands up next. Yeah, that's why I'm moving out here. So the boss is going to stand up again. Same deal. Get out of range of it. And this is where the fight, I think this is actually where the fight starts to pick up in difficulty. Those orbs from earlier are really tough on people, but this is more so where everything starts to kick off more so. There's an Umbra Smash. There's no tank invulns for this. This is super cooldown, and please take care of your tanks here. I cannot stress enough. Do not underestimate how much damage this deals. Go ham on cooldowns. Make sure your tanks swap. And we got lucky. We got 3 Darkness Unleashed in a row. I won't even get to show you Shadow Edge at this rate. So that's going to go off, whatever, mitigate, split. The next mechanic is going to require people to be a little bit quicker. You're going to have to do Voidgates, and you're going to have to do Shadow Servants. So Voidgates require 2 people to stand in each of these little gates. And if you don't, they'll explode on the group. They'll do some damage. I believe they give people damage down. I think we screw it up here, so we'll see it. But more importantly, if 3 towers are failed, if you don't have at least 2 people in at least 3 total towers across these 2 sets of Void Gates, you will all get Doom and die 3 seconds later. I suspect we'll see this a lot more in the future because they just changed the Eureka ability for Sacrifice to not be Doom anymore. And I'm assuming it's because they don't want you overriding this Doom in some way, shape, or form. I don't know why, but I have a feeling this is going to become a much more regular thing. Now, that would be fine. We can set up pairs here. I just moved over clockwise. These are all on Cardinals, so all the people we assigned to Cardinals just stayed there. We had our tanks and our healers basically dealing with this. Then all the DPS just moved over clockwise 1. This is whatever. This doesn't really take that much. And I'm not going to lie, you barely even get to really do it that way. Because either all the tanks and the healers or all the DPS are going to get Shadow Servants. So they need to place their shadows like they did for that Giga Slash earlier, but they need to do it inside the towers. So that roll, they need to check, okay, what shadow do I have? Okay, what side of the boss do I need to be on in order to make this happen safely? and then they need to drop it. So after everybody eats the tower, everyone make sure they place their Giga Slash. You just have to understand how Shadow Servant plus Giga Slash works here. We all go into the middle, and they all go off. Now, same thing's going to happen again, but the timing's going to be a little different. For this one, we basically just, whatever pairs you ended up in for your towers, everyone rotates over clockwise 1, and whichever roll didn't get the first set of Shadow Servants, you will do this tower, and then you will go and drop your shadow with the remaining time that you have. So you'll see that here in a second. You have about, looks like I think it said like 8 seconds or so to do it. 5, 4. So when just as it ticks down to 3 seconds remaining, so really you have like 3.9 seconds remaining, you will then have to look at your shadow and figure out where the correct spot to go is. It's not a lot of time. The second set of people definitely have less time to do it correctly, but I mean, there's nothing else to it. It's such a straightforward mechanic. And then also, as you can see, make sure you remember to step into the boss's hitbox once you've dropped your shadow so you don't die. Bam! Don't want to get slapped like that. Definitely not the way that you want things to go. It's so straightforward that I can't really offer any additional advice. You just have to know how Shadow Servant works and make sure people stand in the Void Gates. Set up the pairs in advance, make sure that people understand where they're going for those, and then be ready to adjust depending on where your shadow ends up. That's all there is to it. And at this point, the fight's like really far in too. Like we're at 30% already. It's pretty nice. Now I'm heading out here, so this is actually introducing a mechanic for later. Pitch Bog. I have to say it slowly because in Prog, we called it, well, swap the B and the P and you'll understand. Just go watch our kill video. And this drops an AoE on each person. You'll see it in a second. It does a lot of damage. That did 86,000 to me. And it gives magic Volt. So you can't stack 2 of them or the people who get hit by both will die. These leave behind puddles. And for this one time, those puddles aren't going to be used for anything. You just have to make sure they're spread out away from the boss. And we're going to ignore them completely. But later in the fight, you'll discover that if you step into one, it pulls you into the center, does a bunch of damage, and then also spawns a Shadow Servant, which will then be used for a mechanic that comes later. That'll be used for that second Voidgate mechanic that I keep warning you about. The bigger thing here is there's Umbral Orbs, and then the boss will transform. They'll go onto all fours and do a knockback. All we did here is we just did the Umbral Orbs exactly the same way we did the first set. We just take all of our priorities. So you can see we're prioritizing this set. We're using that northwest one as true north in a sense. And then we get in our groups of 3 and we all use knockback resist. As soon as he starts going down on all fours, knockback resist. You can see it. And then all of our orbs come to us and we're good. That's it. That's all you need to do. It's immediately followed up by 2 either forward or back implosions. This is random. I don't know why this is here. It's not even a mechanic. It just exists in that spot for whatever reason. I really don't know why that's there. A Deep Shadow Nova, nothing too fancy with this. And then you're going to actually come to a tether mechanic, which kind of comes out of nowhere too. It's Shackled. I know it's Shackled. What's it called? Let's like the full name. Shackled Apart. So this is going to tether each DPS to either a tank or a healer. Simply put, we put all our DPS on the south side of the room, all of our tanks and healers on the north side of the room. Nothing fancy here. And then he's going to do Fade to Shadow. This is the squiggly lines plus the straight lines. So on opposite sides of the room, each group is going to have to, go to their squiggly line. All our DPS, we go to this squiggly line, and then on the opposite side of the room, it's another squiggly line. Now, this is probably the hardest set of Umbral Orbs throughout the whole fight, because these Umbral Orbs will go off but a mere moment after the second set of Fade to Shadow AoEs goes off. But there's something that a lot of people get worried about here that I think needs to be unlearned, in a sense. These tethers, these stay apart tethers, wear off now. They wear off way before the second AoEs go out. And I think this was something a lot of us in Prog, we felt like we had to stay opposite of our tanks and healers the whole time. They're gone. We can go stand next to anyone we want at this point. So my biggest piece of advice for this is as soon as those tethers disappear, don't think about just rotating clockwise and whatever. You might end up just at the wrong orb set, or you might need to move so far to get to the correct orb set, people die. I think that actually, I'm almost positive that actually kind of happens here. It kind of worked out that I'm one group and the healer is set to be the other group. It means we're opposite of one another. And I actually feel like that might be kind of beneficial in a sense to have a DPS be the beacon point for a mechanic and the healer, because it means that the other group of people can go to the healer now that they're pairing with, and my group can come to me, and we should be fine because all 4 DPS are moving together here. Because at this exact moment, we basically had to identify which orb we were going to, rotate to it, and then make sure to get into positions right after the second AoE set goes off. And you see us do it perfectly right there, almost perfectly. I can see that only one person got a damage down? Is that right? Somebody must have missed that because, oh, did they get, oh no, they got hit by an AoE, I think. I think they got hit by one of these. No, they definitely took the hit from that. That's weird. How did only one? Oh no, 2 people did get it. Yeah. So one person didn't rotate correctly. They survived, but they got the damage down. So yeah, you can see, I think it looked like somebody rotated close to me and then had to go far. Let me see. Yeah, you see that the ninja doesn't quite make it over there. But everyone else did exactly what we were supposed to do. We rotated towards the one that we were prioritizing based on our priority system. And then quickly moved into a spot. Basically, the second set should have 1 tank and a party of 3, and then 1 will go left and 1 will go right. That's pretty much how it's always going to end up working. This in particular takes a good amount of practice to get the movement down because it is finicky. And if you do not do it right, it can only lead to trouble. Now, we're at 18% here, and the next big mechanic is the one that I think people are going to want to skip after a few weeks. If you do not, it is not a problem. There are actually tons of great strategies out there that can make it really easy. Some of them not friendly to melee players, some of them more friendly to melee players. Our strategy was melee friendly, but we kind of limped through Prog to survive it only because we actually didn't understand how another mechanic worked, and we learned after the fact. So this is where we kind of just winged our positioning. What we did here didn't make any sense because I was at 1 for my marker before. I was northwest for my spread position. I'm south now. And this was actually a result of us having both of our ranged on the same side of the room and not spread out on opposite sides of the room. If you're doing 2 ranged and you want to do this strategy, which I'm not going to lie, the party finder probably isn't going to want to do this strategy. This is a melee uptime strategy that is not caster friendly at all. You're going to want to make sure you're ranged on opposite sides of the room, similar to your healers. So that way there's no confusion here because I had to just run to Narnia in order to do this mechanic. But you can see we all drop it on those nice crisp markers. And then we have to do a left-right Giga Slash. The spacing here is a little tight because we're letting our melees do melee uptime mechanics. But it's Giga Slash plus shadows. So, you know, he's raising his left hand so we get to the right of every shadow. Tank privilege right there. That's A-okay. He's a tank. Oh, the other tank privilege. There you go. We're going to have more tank privileges? Nope, no more tank privileges. Any more tank privileges? No more tank privileges. As soon as that 4th Giga Slash goes out, everybody went back to the exact same puddle they dropped. This isn't mandatory. You don't have to go back to the exact same one. We did so for our strategy, and this summons a clone that will follow behind you. Get away from it very quickly, or it will cleave and kill you. Now, what we did for this is our melees basically take theirs, and they go to... They go to a puddle in the center of the room. They're going to a Voidgate in the center of the room. And you'll get kind of a glimpse of it in a second here when you see us do it. What the heck does that person do? Oh, no, never mind. And then the ranged all just drop these along the outside. And we face them kind of towards the outside of the room. That isn't actually mandatory that you drop them the direction that I'm facing. But this is what we decided that we would do because it lets the other person rotating into the tower. It gives them, it just gives them a ton of space to work with. Because what we're going to do is as soon as that shadow appears, we all run to the clockwise position and stand behind the other person's shadow so it doesn't cleave us. That's true of the melees who are just rotating into the next clockwise tower. That's true of the range. Unfortunately, it's also true of the casters. If you don't have swift cast, triple cast, or if you're not a summoner who just laughs at things like this kind of sucks. I'm not gonna lie. This kind of sucks for casters. I'm almost wondering if you can have a healer rescue a caster, like a pity rescue, to like try and get them safely into it. I think that would work fine, but the healer would still suffer a lot from GCD loss. Unless you have a healer rescue a caster who's then rescued by another healer who then sprints and just doesn't care. This is not caster friendly at all. It's meant to be melee friendly. We were trying to push in rages. Our caster didn't mind. Our healers didn't mind. They were just focused on doing mechanics. I'm ranged physical. I'm not allowed an opinion in anything because lead, we can do whatever the heck we want. And we shouldn't have any input on the strategies altogether. So all we end up doing is we end up splitting it with the shadow. So you can see that's what it looks like. That just looks beautiful, but we didn't understand how the next mechanic works, so it falls apart pretty quick, and we're actually kind of lucky this was a kill. So you get kind of an idea of what all the positions end up looking like here. Immediately after these towers go off is an attack called Shadowy Eruption. This will drop an AoE at the foot of every player. So I read the description of the shadows, and the description of the shadows reads that any damage the shadow takes will be dealt to the player. I don't know why we didn't consider that for these AoEs dropped on the ground, because you need to drop these AoEs away from the shadows. So this is risk number 2 with this strategy. Everyone standing with a shadow, everyone needs to consciously get away from the shadow as well. So ideally what I would have done, and you're not going to see me do it here, I can promise you that, what we should have done is then taken a step back and just dropped our shadow and dropped our AoE here. Now for the melees, they could just take a step to the left because they're all, the way they've all rotated, they basically just need to take a step away from each of their shadows. That's all that needs to be done here. None of us do that. Look how that looked beautiful, right? Watch us screw it all immediately. Watch, I'm gonna drop my I don't know how we get through the second set. I'm not gonna lie. They're pretty big AoEs, as you can see, and you really cannot afford those to screw up. Quite frankly, I think we should have actually dropped all of these intercardinally from the boss, kind of where these AoEs are right now. Where these void gates in the middle of the room are. We should have probably just dropped them all there, had 2 people on each intercardinal, and then just moved. We didn't know, so you're gonna see right here, look how many people die. I kill the healer tether that's next to me. I got saved. My dude moved way out and I got saved. And that means I don't really get to talk accurately about the next mechanic, because we had a whole strategy for this. It wasn't like we got to this blindly and then lucked our way through it. Oh, that's how we had 4 people alive, so we don't get 3 stacks. That explains a lot. So all that ends up happening here is that the tanks and the healers all go into a tower, and then the melees, all the DPS, I mean, we just look at who we're tethered to and go to that void gate. That's all this last part is. It's literally just the DPS follow where the tanks and healers are, and they all get in a tower each. Because this shackled is shackled together. You need to be standing with your tethered partner until it wears off, which it'll wear off about a second after these void gates go. Now, the only reason we survived is because we had 4 people alive. We got only 2 stacks of the Doom, and then I believe we healer LB'd. Yes, we did. So as long as you can keep at least 4 people alive, you will be fine. That much I can promise you. There is this Umbra Slash here, which, ooh, he just barely survives. Yeah, that Umbra Slash is scary. I think one of your tank invulns should be back. His Hallowed won't be back, but I think our Gunbreaker Super Bolide would have been back by now. So the more invulns you have, the easier this part kind of becomes. But we were panicking and coming together. We didn't get a single Shadow Edge in our clear? All right. Yeah, we didn't get a single Shadow Edge in our clear. We got Darkness Unleashed every single time. So just know there is a possible tank buster. Now, there is another set of Umbral Orbs here, but there's nothing that happens with them, if I'm recalling. Oh, no, it's a knockback. No, okay, it is. It's knockback plus Umbral Orbs again. So this one is just get to your orbs and then knockback resist. Then you shouldn't have any issues. But I think we lose some more people here. Oh, I die. I'm so dead. Oh, no, I don't die. 2 other people die. We were panicking at this point. The strategy is it's still the same. It doesn't matter. I think it's then 2 Deep Shadow Novas and then Enrage, I want to say. I'm almost positive that's what it is. I think there's another Deep Shadow here, because we actually saw it to Enrage before this pull. One more? I just want to... Yeah, it might be 3 even, but we definitely don't see a third one. I don't think the Enrage is a Deep Shadow Nova, though, but I'd have to look back. Oh, it is 3. Okay, good thing you did that. 3 back-to-back Deep Shadow Novas and then Enrage. So as soon as you've done second Void Gate, you're pretty much in the home stretch. But that just shows you how little of the fight is left by the time you get to second Void Gate. This is why groups with a lot of gear are just going to skip this entirely after a few weeks. It means that party finders that have people that are used to skipping it and people that see it every week are probably going to clash a little bit. But it shouldn't be that bad. I mean, it's not that difficult a mechanic to execute on. It's just scary. It's scarier than not doing it. I think is probably the best way I could think to put it. Because not doing it makes this whole phase a joke. And doing it is the difference between winning and losing if you're not lucky. Just keep at least 4 people alive and you should be okay. I don't think people are going to adopt this strat, as melee friendly as it is. I think people are going to stick to, I think it's Ilya's strat, where each melee and range, basically 2 players pair up and drop both of their shadows in a tower. And then all 8 players go into the center of the room, and 2 players stand in each of those towers. The melees have to disengage for a fairly long time to do this strategy. It's not melee friendly, but it's also very easy to execute on. And I have a feeling that's going to become the standard. The Party Finder is not super interested. We did a lot of melee friendly strategies in our progression, and I'm okay with that. I'm actually used to, as a ranged, not really caring about melee friendly strategies and not really putting them in my videos, but we just happen to have a lot of melee friendly strategies in our tier that end up not being super caster friendly. And so I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with presenting a way to be done for groups that are looking for melee uptime. And then I think that people can at least intuit ways to improve that and actually help the casters, such as using healer rescues or saving things like swift cast or triple cast or whatnot. That being said, the Party Finder is a whole different beast. I don't suspect our Voidgate strategy will be used. I'll be putting that in the guide itself. But I mean, this fight's really straightforward. I think if people stick to the I don't care about my DPS strategy, then I don't see that many wipes, unless it's to people just doing the orbs wrong. But overall, fun fight. A little gimmicky, but very satisfying to do correctly. And that should hopefully give you a little bit of insight into the way that we approached our progression for E10 Savage. So with that, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And I will be putting out an E10 Savage guide in the next couple of days. It will be using the strategies you see here, but I will be making mention that I do not expect the Party Finder to adopt them. And I hope more so to just explain how the mechanic works, so people looking to understand it can go in with some knowledge of the way that it works and not just look at it and go, how do I solve this? Don't talk to me, just tell me what to do. With that, I will see you all in the next video, so thank you for watching, and until then, take care.